Christian Watson is the most expensive Packers wide receiver in Dynasty leagues, but here's why you should be buying Jayden Reed. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Pro Football Focus and Behind the Steel Curtain. And joining us today, of course, on a Wednesday, is Matt Williamson. Follow him on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel as well. We are answering your Twitter questions today. We've got some really good ones, including which veteran running back should I try to acquire, and which backup quarterback is worth stashing in the deepest of dynasty leagues. But Matt, let's start with this first question from Mark. He wants to know, can you guys rank the Packers pass catchers long-term in dynasty?
This is difficult. I mean, there's no question about it. And I'm not sure if he's even trying to go down this road, but I adore Musgrave still. I know that we're talking
That's my guy.
receivers here.
That's my number
I
one
love
option.
Musgrave.
People just cheated with this question. Get out.
And then I'm going to cheat again because I think Doubs is a distant fourth. I think he's an average athlete, an average player, strives to be Robert Woods, one of those type of guys where maybe he's an okay 2 in the NFL, but I think that's even a stretch. So I think he's a distant fourth, but that's also a great compliment to the other three who are much more dynamic, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Wicks would be 3, but that's selling him short. Like, we talk about this on Steelers Nation Radio. Could we pry Wicks away from the Packers for the Steelers? Like, probably not. And then the other two are neck and neck, but I'm leaning towards Reed. I think he's just a little bit more reliable. I know the whole one leg's bigger than the other with Watson, but that doesn't exactly make me think, oh, he's a lock to stay on the field forever. And he was a one-trick pony to begin with, but that's close. It's a very, very close.
So, Kate, before I let you answer, I want to give everybody, all the listeners, the current rankings for these receivers. Right now, Christian Watson is the most expensive at wide receiver 31. Jayden Reed coming in at wide receiver 33. Then we got Dontavian Wicks at wide receiver 53. Romeo Doubs, wide receiver 54. So, Kate, without thinking of the current rankings, how do you project this wide receiver core?
I don't even need to think about the rankings. This is so far Jayden Reed for me. It's not even close. Now, maybe it depends on sort of your archetype, your preferred archetype for a wide receiver. I tend to like the archetypes that I think are more conducive to consistent production. You look at Christian Watson's production, and so much of it has come from deep targets, which is very conducive for a high upside projection, but it's also not necessarily something you can bank on for any sort of level of consistency. So like that archetype of wide receiver might win you a week, but they might lose you 4 in the process because they are getting some, low probability completion throws deep down the sideline. You hope some of them hit, but that based on the type of targets they're getting, they're probably not. You have Jayden Reed, who is being, given, some more layups, like had a relatively low average depth of target here as a rookie. But again, as a rookie, that was pretty awesome for him. He racked up yards after the catch, ranked 8th among wide receivers as a rookie in terms of fantasy points per route run, 5th in terms of fantasy points per target. Like, again, he not a high ADOT, but like, we're pretty high on Rashee Rice, right? And honestly, their usage, I think their archetype is extremely similar. So why aren't we also giving Jayden Reed that benefit of the doubt here?
Matt, I wanted to ask you. I think a lot of people in the fantasy and the dynasty community just assume that this wide receiver core is going to be like it was last year, where probably no 1,000-yard receiver, and the guy that eats one week is not going to be the guy that eats the next week. Do you buy that, or do you think that one of these guys will kind of emerge from the pack?
I don't think one will emerge from the pack, but I think Kate said a lot of really good stuff that I agree with. And you mentioned Rashee Rice. I would even say Deontay Johnson. Like if Jayden Reed can develop as a route runner, a man coverage beater, outs, curls, slants, quick hitting stuff, as well as the manufactured touches you see for Rice, he could separate. I mean, Deontay is the route runner, but Jayden Reed has more big play ability than Johnson. Where Watson, I have to admit, I have a little bias as an old school scout for big, strong, fast. But for fantasy, there is a lot of boom and bust with him, and will, better health, better balance in his lower body, help him become a more developed route runner. I have some serious doubts.
Here's the thing, though, coming out of college, like that was also a concern with Christian Watson. He was big, strong, fast. He was not a technically proficient wide receiver. He did not win, routes based on, twitchiness and deceiving the defensive backs, right? Like he won because he was big, strong, fast, period. He was not a wide receiver. He was an athlete. And I'm sorry, I'm going to stick by that. I don't think he's done all that much in terms of the development. The health obviously hasn't helped matters whatsoever, but Jayden Reed, similar draft capital. Last year, he outproduced Christian Watson. Jayden Reed outproduced Christian Watson in the following categories: games played, pretty important one, percentage of catchable targets that were caught, passer rating when targeted, yards after the catch per reception, percentage of routes run on which he was targeted, yards per route run. Like there was absolutely nothing, almost nothing that Christian Watson did that was better than what Jayden Reed did. Like Jayden Reed, I think, is one of the best values in Dynasty right now. And the fact that Christian Watson has overtaken him in the ranks kind of shocks me, again, because of the volatility that I think you're going to get from Christian Watson. Again, we saw that very high upside, but we have seen that the floor for Christian Watson is about as low as you can get. Like he is in most weeks a flex play. Jayden Reed, I think in most weeks is a wide receiver too.
And to back your point even more, it might seem like a small thing, and it might be, but I mean, in the dynasty world, you have to be, aware of these things. Watson's only under contract one less year than those others too. He was drafted the year before them. If he continues to be up and down, considering they're stable receivers, their success drafting them, he could be in the open market and not, in a good situation before you know it in the dynasty world. He has another up and down year. People are not going to be thinking about him at all.
Yep.
Can I give you my elevator pitch for Dontavian Wicks over all of these guys? I'll be really quick. You look at the history of the NFL draft and receivers that were drafted on day 3 that produced over 500 yards as rookies. I mean, almost all of those guys ended up becoming star wide receivers in the NFL, whether it's like Tyreek Hill or Puka. I mean, it's a very short list of names, but almost all of those receivers ended up having fantastic careers. Dontavian Wicks had over 600 yards as a 5th-round pick. And if you look at some of the stable metrics from PFF, he was above the 59th percentile in every single one of them. 82nd percentile receiving grade, 76th percentile separation percentage, 87th percentile against zone, 72nd percentile yards after the catch. He's just one of these guys that as a day 3 rookie stood out. I'm really, really intrigued. I won't be surprised if he develops kind of into the go-to receiver for Jordan Love when it really matters. And he's one of the cheapest. He's wide receiver 53. I'm buying all the Dontavian Wicks that I can right now.
To agree with both of you, actually, at cost, I would pay for Wicks because he's cheaper. Depending what you have to pay for these guys, at cost, I would pay for Wicks. And I bet all 3 of us could write a story where it's Wicks and Reed out there in 2 receiver sets by week 5.
They're just going to be the most reliable. I would have to assume. So actually, I think probably the strategy here is just to go buy 2, maybe even 3 of these receivers because they're so cheap, and hope that one really does separate themselves from the pack. That's
Literally.
Yeah.
Hey.
All right, let's get to some more Twitter questions, including which rookie running back should I trade for a veteran starter? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you some of the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's get to another question here. This is a really good one from Fantasy Friend. He wants to know, which rookie running backs would you sell to tier up to veterans to chase a championship? And Matt, I've got some names here for you. This is going by the average draft position from Dynasty League Football. Blake Corum and Tony Pollard have almost identical ADPs. Would you feel comfortable trading Corum to go get Pollard if you were in a win now window?
This is a great question and always a difficult question, but I think you have to always phrase it through a win now window, of course. Like, I need somebody to start. Not always, but I've often made this mistake over my dynasty career where this time of year I build this wonderful roster and then week one rolls around on Sunday and I'm checking boxes like, I don't want to start that guy. He's too young. He's a backup. Like, you got to put somebody in the lineup. Yeah. So, yes, I would be comfortable with that. I think the Titans' offense is going to be at least a step better. I mean, their line was probably the worst in the league.
Competent? Is that fair?
Competence is fine. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weapons. I think that the offense takes a step forward. Coaching change. But I'm comfortable with that move. Comfortable.
Kate, what do you think?
I think I'm comfortable with all of those. I agree. You have to be chasing the championship. And here's the thing. We love projecting rookies at this time of year, but we should be honest with ourselves and acknowledging that hitting on one of these rookies is a totally different prospect, right? There are a lot of circumstances that contribute to a player's ability to break out. But like, I want us to remind ourselves, and Matt, you were part of the problem in this circumstance. So was I. Like, let's look back to a Tank Bigsby, who everybody was projecting to be a big time threat for Travis Etienne. And it seemed like there was it was a given, right? And that could not have been any further from the truth. But like this, I think Tank Bigsby is just a really great, kind of opportunity to look back and say to ourselves, how did that narrative get so out of control? Right? Because we let ourselves spiral on these rookies and not all of them are going to pan out. When we're kind of telling ourselves the story of how they can come up and lead their respective backfields, that's not actually going to happen for, probably most of these rookies. Right. So like, yeah, if I can take one of these young guys with so much uncertainty, I am going to try to turn it into immediate production. I think Blake Corum for Tony Pollard is a really great example of how you could do that, because I'm looking at their overall touches, right? So Tony Pollard, pulling up his college stats, he had 139 total rush attempts in his 3 seasons at Memphis, and that was mostly because he was used quite often as a receiver, right?
As a slot receiver. Yep.
Yeah. So like 139 rush attempts. Blake Corum coming out of college, 674 rush attempts. So yeah, Tony Pollard, he has had 762 rush attempts over 5 seasons in the NFL. But you're looking at like the gap in terms of rush attempts between these two guys, even dating back to their college days, not super significant. Tony Pollard, what? I think he's 2 years older than Blake Corum. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like the gap in terms of even their age, touch total. Blake Corum accumulated a ton of touches at Michigan. So like I don't think they're actually as far apart in terms of wear and tear and age as it probably feels like when you consider the fact that Blake Corum is a rookie and Tony Pollard's going into his 6th season.
And the other thing that I'll add in really quickly, if you're watching with us on YouTube, Tony Pollard got off to a really slow start last year, coming back from that broken leg. But over the final 2 months of the season, we started to see that player again that we saw in 2021, 2022. First in PFF grade, 7th in yards per carry, 2nd in missed forced tackles, 6th in yards after contact per attempt. We started to see a really good player. I think you can buy low on Tony Pollard right now. I know this offense isn't going to be as good as the Cowboys offense was last year, but this, I think it was pretty well established that like Tony Pollard was one of the maybe top 10, top 12 pure running backs in the league prior to the 2023 season. And now you can get him for, a 2nd, 3rd round pick running back in your dynasty leagues. I would do that all day, Matt.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, it's been a year, but I mean, in redraft last year, he was like a borderline 1st round player. Yeah. And that sounds a little crazy, but not when he was healthy at the end of the season, like you just showed.
All right, man, let's get to some other ones that I have. The next running back down after Blake Corum is actually Marshawn Lloyd with the Packers. This is a Packers show, apparently, being drafted at RB 33. Now, I have a couple of names of veterans that are being drafted right next to him. So, again, assuming you are in a win now window, would you, Matt, feel comfortable trading Marshawn Lloyd for one of Aaron Jones or James Conner, who have almost identical ADPs?
I think that's fair. A.J. Dillon stinks. I think Josh Jacobs is a bad signing that's gotten beat up so bad that was a lesser player last year and is on the decline. So I think Lloyd's path is pretty nice, to be honest with you. But those 2 backs you mentioned are certainly a lot more useful for now.
Kate?
Yeah, I think Aaron Jones is probably one of the most underrated. I think Aaron Jones is one of the most underrated assets here in fantasy right now, heading into this season. There are plenty of question marks about what we're going to get out of, the Vikings offense in general. Like, we don't even know. I think JJ McCarthy should start. I think he's much better than Sam Darnold, but like apparently there's this step plan and they've got a whole thing. So like, who knows who's starting? But I also think the level of competition behind Aaron Jones is absolutely nothing. You have some very capable receiving weapons. Like, regardless of who's under center, I do think this could be a pretty productive offense. And I do want to remind everybody. So like Aaron Jones had dealt with some injury last year, missed a little bit of time, but to close out the season, I'm honestly surprised that like for a group of people who are like as I don't know, like dynasty managers let recency bias absolutely eat them alive. But in the final 6 games that Aaron Jones played, he had 5 of those with 100+ rushing yards. He was as efficient as you could have gotten in his final 6 games played here in 2023. Like, recency bias should be loving Aaron Jones because I do think he's going to get an opportunity to lead a backfield. He wasn't overly efficient throughout the whole course of the season, but when you remember that he was injured and when he came back finally fully healthy, he absolutely took over that backfield and looked like primetime Aaron Jones. Like, I don't know why people aren't higher on Aaron Jones. And James Conner, I actually just wrote him up in an article, should be dropping today, I believe, on Pro Football Focus.
It's there. I read it this morning.
Dynasty veterans that you should be trading for in a win now window. And guess who made the list? It was James Conner.
We love James Conner.
One of the most productive running backs in the league last year, coming off a career season, does not look to have lost a step. And I love Trey Benson. I think Trey Benson is closer to a top 12 running back than he is RB20. And I still think that James Conner, as long as he's healthy, is going to lead this backfield here in his final year with the Cardinals. Like, one of my favorite veteran trade targets at this point in Dynasty is being valued, I think, somewhere around RB30, RB34. Like, yeah, you're probably going to get a top 15 performance out of him once again. And
I've got one more quick one that I want to get to before we go to our next segment. This is the same backfield, which makes it very interesting. Jaylen Wright being drafted as RB38. Would you trade him again if you are in a win now window for Raheem Mostert, Matt?
I don't think so. I think Mostert is old. I mean, just frankly, I mean, he had a really good year.
He is old.
He's just about the oldest back out there, not named Zeke Elliott. He's in that neighborhood. I think the wall is coming so fast for him. And I've thought that about him his whole career because he runs really fast and he runs into things really hard. And I'm surprised he's lasted as long as he has. I think you're on borrowed time.
Matt, would you be surprised to learn that Raheem Mostert is 4 years older than Ezekiel Elliott?
Wow, that does shock me. I knew Mostert was the oldest regular back in the league, but didn't think it was 4 years different.
4 years older. Kate, what do you think?
I would 100% do that. Absolutely smash. And this is somebody who had some question marks about Jaylen Wright. And I do think he was kind of put into a absolutely perfect situation. Like, this is the ideal offense. But let's ask like more surprising facts. Would it surprise you guys to hear that Raheem Mostert actually has, 100 fewer career rush attempts than Raheem Mostert at this point in his career?
Who did? Sorry, say that again.
Tony Pollard has about 100 more career rush attempts than Raheem Mostert. And that's why Raheem Mostert has lasted, because he didn't really play on his rookie contract. I think through his first 4 seasons, I think he had somewhere of around, I'm doing quick mental math here, 42 rush attempts on his rookie contract. So like, when you're looking at age, I'm sorry, like, I get it. He's old and I'm 32 and I wake up every day and I just hurt for no reason. So like, I can't imagine that. But I also know Raheem Mostert's taken a lot better care of himself than I have. He's in much better shape than I am. So like, when not every 32 is the same. And, again, you look at a guy like Raheem Mostert versus a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. I think we know which one of them is closer to being washed. Like, age is one thing, but I do think you need to consider the number of touches. And let's also consider the fact that, as I've been harping on all offseason long, the Miami Dolphins are telling us he's the lead running back. Maybe we should listen. He's going to win people leagues again this year, I promise.
Just to throw out a devil advocate thing on Mostert, a reason he doesn't have a lot of touches is he's been injured and he isn't that good.
Man. How many games do you think Raheem Mostert has missed over the last 2 seasons?
Not many of the last 2, but his Niner carear was hard to stay on the field. Which is
interesting because he's had more carries over the past 2 seasons with the Miami Dolphins than he's had 100 more carries. Yeah. Okay. Mental math. He's had 100 more carries in his time with the Dolphins than he did, period.
Before that.
Like,
that adds up. Yeah.
I'm just saying. So like, yeah, we can say like he's been injured, which has been true, but when he's actually been getting a substantial workload, he's been pretty healthy. Like, I don't know. I think somebody
have the listeners tell us. I want them to break this tie. Who they would rather have there in a win now window, Jaylen Wright or Raheem Mostert. Please let us know. I think that it would be a really, really fun. Let's get to our final question, which is, which backup quarterback are you stashing in your dynasty leagues? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions on this episode of the show. And our final one comes from Josh. He wants to know, I am in a very deep Superflex league. Which backup dynasty quarterback should I be stashing? Matt, here are some names that are out there right now. Justin Fields for your Pittsburgh Steelers, Trey Lance for my Dallas Cowboys, I guess. Hendon Hooker, Aiden O'Connell with the Raiders, who will probably be a backup there this year. Jameis Winston. There's Mike White in Miami. Do any of those guys excite you at all?
Sam Howell, Seattle Seahawks.
Sam
I
Howell.
have 3 buckets that have two quarterbacks at each, and Lance and Fields are in their own bucket. We know they're immense fantasy upside if they could ever get a chance because of their legs, and they were drafted high and they're still relatively young. They're worth the most to me of this conversation. Age, who knows when they get on the field, etc. We all know their stories, but they're in a bucket. As Kate mentioned, Howe and Drew Lock to me are in their own bucket too, because I don't think the guys ahead of them are all that scary or might not be there for long. And it sure seems like the Seahawks twice, I guess, when they went and got Locke, and then when they went and got Howe, really liked the player. And the Giants went out of their way to go get Locke as well. So I think Locke and Howe, especially with how we go through quarterback injuries in this league, might really factor in maybe even in redraft leagues this year. And then I have 2 old guys I just can't quite quit, and that's Jameis Winston. I still think Winston's good. Maybe I'm insane. Yeah. And I don't think Watson's good. And maybe Winston, like Flacco, looks like the best quarterback there, or Watson gets injured. And then one we haven't mentioned, Carson Wentz. Heaven forbid Pat gets hurt. But if Pat gets hurt, Wentz might shoot up boards in terms of his stock.
Did I miss this? Did we mention Jacoby Brissett, who might actually be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots this year?
He's probably the best player we've mentioned yet, too.
Probably.
Best football player, right. He's really good. Yeah.
Jacoby Brissett, like, for fantasy managers, like, might actually end up being one of the best values you could possibly trade for right now, because I do think that there's a realistic shot, just depending on how things pan out with Drake May. Like, similar to a JJ McCarthy, I don't think they're looking to throw, like, they're not looking to be competitive this year, right? Like, they're not necessarily looking to ruin the mentality of their new franchise quarterback by throwing him out there before they feel he's fully prepared. And they have a very good bridge quarterback to do that in Jacoby Brissett. Like, Jacoby Brissett might be the best guy you could possibly trade for, because I do think out of everybody that we're mentioning, he's probably the only guy on the list that I think has a true shot to start the season without any injury occurring to the starter, presumed starter.
I don't want to stir things up, but I mean, I know you thought McCarthy should start too, but I would put Darnold and Brissett in their own bucket too, because I think I think they'll both start. There's both talent there. Maybe they show enough that another team does the same thing with them.
I just want to mention Aiden O'Connell. I think of all the quarterbacks on this list, the upside is the lowest with AOC. I mean, he's just not a runner. However, if we're thinking about this in a super flex league, right? Sometimes all you want from that second quarterback is somebody who's starting, or your third quarterback, right? Somebody who actually can play week to week. I think there's a good chance that AOC wins that job in Las Vegas, and you're throwing to Devontae Adams, who is going like in the second round of redraft leagues this year. You've got Brock Bowers, who is being in dynasty leagues, being drafted as a 3rd overall tight end. Jacoby Myers is a very competent receiver. Trey Tucker's having a good offseason. Like, there's a lot of weapons on this offense, and it costs you nothing to go out and get AOC. And I just won't be surprised if he's a 17-game starter, puts up modest numbers, and significantly outproduces where he's being drafted right now.
Doesn't he seem like a Minshew or a Fitzpatrick that'll be in Superflex Dynasty leagues
forever
for the next 10 years?
Yeah. And he's incredibly smart.
He might be on 10 different teams. Right?
Yep. He's smart. He's accurate. He's not afraid to stand tall in the pocket. It's just, he doesn't give you that upside, which means that everybody's going to devalue him. But again, if you're just looking for somebody to be your third quarterback and you don't want to spend a ton, I think it makes some sense. Kate, any final thoughts on ASC? I can't believe we're leaving the show talking about Aiden O'Connell. This is great.
Going out with a bang.
No, but I'm like, you might have sold me, and I feel really gross about this, but like, I have a best ball dynasty league where I have a good solid group of starters there. I have depth at the quarterback position, but even if he doesn't start this year, I feel like y'all are right. There's probably some sort of chance that he just floats around the NFL and just randomly, because it's best ball, like I might just randomly get points from
exactly.
and Aiden O'Connell. Like, he might be like the most easy, low maintenance guy where I'm just going to leave him on my roster for the next 5 years and accumulate points when I have the opportunity. But
he'll start 20 games over those 5
Yeah.
years or whatever.
it's icky, but hey, dynasty fantasy football is not always pretty. As long
Hey,
as
don't forget,
Yeah.
Aiden O'Connell had a game last year where they scored 63 points. So listen, he can lead a high-powered offense, believe it or not. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen of the day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Go check out his YouTube channel as well. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk, and I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And we will see you next time.